the woman I married started disappearing. My name is Natalie Harper, and I'm 35 years old. For 12 years, I've driven a truck across America. Some people see a woman climbing out of a big rig and look surprised. I got used to those looks a long time ago. What they don't see are the nights I slept in truck stops, the holidays I missed, or the years I spent saving every extra dollar so I could buy my own truck and build a business from scratch. That truck gave me everything. It gave me my freedom. It gave me my house. And eventually, it gave me my husband. Or at least, that's what I believed. I met Ryan 7 years ago. He was funny, easygoing, and unlike a lot of men, he never acted threatened by my job. When we married 5 years ago, I thought I'd found someone who understood me. I made around $180,000 a year if business was good. I owned my house outright. My truck was fully paid off. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Ryan used to brag about me. My wife owns her own trucking company. He'd tell people, proudly. Sometimes, he'd wait up for me when I came home from a long haul. He'd make coffee and ask me about every mile of the trip. Back then, he felt loud. Back then, he looked at me like I was extraordinary. Everything changed when his older sister, Vanessa Cole, got divorced for the second time. Vanessa had a talent for blaming everyone except herself. According to her, every ex-husband she'd ever had was abusive, selfish, or controlling. Yet somehow she always expected men to pay her bills. At first, Ryan laughed at her bitterness. Then she started coming over more often. A few times a month became every week. Then, every other day. Soon, she practically lived at our house. I didn't notice the changes immediately. They were small. Ryan asking why my business account wasn't a joint account. Ryan asking why the truck title only had my name. Ryan asking exactly how much money I made every month. At first, I answered patiently, "It's business." Ryan, "Commercial accounts are separate for a reason." He nodded, then asked again a few days later, and again, and again. Eventually, his questions started sounding less like curiosity and more like an interrogation. One night over dinner, he said casually, "Don't you think married couples should share everything?" I looked up from my plate. "We do share everything." "No," he said slowly. "I mean, everything." I knew exactly what he meant. I laughed nervously. He didn't. That was the first time I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Over the next few months, Ryan changed. He became suspicious, defensive, entitled. He started saying things that sounded strangely familiar. Phrases like, "A real partner wouldn't keep secrets," "A husband deserves financial security," "Marriage means equal ownership." I had heard all those lines before. From Vanessa. Even his appearance changed. Ryan suddenly started dressing differently. More expensive clothes, designer shoes, a new watch. I didn't remember him buying. He spent longer in front of mirrors, started posting pictures online. It felt like he was becoming a different person. Or maybe the real person was finally stepping out. One Sunday, my father pulled me aside after dinner. He lowered his voice. "Natalie, your husband is starting to sound exactly like his sister." "Isaiah." "I know." Dad looked worried. "That woman is poison." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend my marriage. Instead, I stayed quiet, because deep down, I was afraid he might be right. A few weeks later, I came home after 3 profitable cross-country runs. I was exhausted but happy. I had made nearly $8,000. I walked inside, expecting a hug. Instead, Ryan was sitting on the couch, with his arms folded. "You care more about that truck than you do about me." I blinked. "What?" "You heard me." I laughed. because the accusation sounded ridiculous. He didn't laugh. When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time you stayed home for more than 2 days? I stared at him. This conversation felt rehearsed, like someone had handed him a script. Ryan, this job pays for everything. Vanessa says that's just an excuse. There it was. The name, the source. I suddenly realized I wasn't arguing with my husband anymore. I was arguing with his sister speaking through him. And I had a terrible feeling. This was only the beginning. The divorce threat, the argument should have ended there. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Over the next few weeks, Ryan complained about everything. I was gone too much. I worked too hard. I cared too much about money. It didn't matter that those same trucking runs paid for the house we lived in, the vacations we'd taken, or the comfortable lifestyle he enjoyed. Suddenly, none of it was enough. One evening, he stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed. Why can't you get a normal job? I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Anormal, Job. Other wives are home every night. I stared at him. Other wives don't make what I make. Maybe I'd rather have my wife than your money. The words stung, because once upon a time, he had been proud of my ambition. Now he talked about my career as though it were a mistress, stealing me away. The worst part, a tiny piece of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I had been gone too much. Maybe I had missed things. But then I'd remember the nights Ryan happily spent my money without asking where it came from. The guilt would disappear. Because this wasn't about loneliness. This was about entitlement. Vanessa made sure of that. She practically moved into my house. One Sunday afternoon, I came home after a 3-day run and found her stretched across my recliner. Her shoes were on my coffee table. The television was blaring. Ryan was in the kitchen making her coffee. Perfect timing. Vanessa said without even looking at me, "Can you turn up the heat? I'm freezing." I blinked. I thought I had heard her wrong. Ryan handed her a mug. "There you go." I stood in my own living room, feeling like a stranger. "Vanessa," I said carefully. "Could you at least take your feet off my table?" She slowly turned her head. "Excuse me. My table." She laughed. "This is my brother's house too." "No," I replied calmly. "It's our house." She smirked. "Maybe if you were home more often, you'd remember how families work." I felt my jaw tighten. Ryan said nothing. Not one word. That hurt more than Vanessa's attitude. I looked at him. "Are you seriously okay with this?" He sighed dramatically. "You're being sensitive." Sensitive. I had worked 12 years to build the life we lived in. I had paid cash for this house. I had spent thousands of nights alone in truck stops and rest areas. And somehow I was being called sensitive for asking a guest to respect my furniture. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Control issues. That's your problem." I laughed in disbelief. "I'm controlling because I don't want shoes on my table." She shrugged. "I can see why Ryan is unhappy." "That did it?" I looked directly at her. "I don't remember asking for your opinion." The room went silent. Ryan immediately stood. "You don't have to be rude." I turned toward him. "You're defending her. She's my sister. And I'm your wife." For a moment, he looked uncomfortable. Then Vanessa spoke again. "See, this is exactly what I was telling you about. She wants to control everything." Ryan's face hardened. The look he gave me chilled me. Because for the first time in our marriage, he believed her. That night he barely spoke to me. The next morning he acted as though I owed his sister an apology. I realized then that I was losing him. Not to another woman, not to an affair, but to resentment. And resentment is far more dangerous. A few weeks later, things got worse. I came home from another trip and found Ryan sitting at the dining table with several sheets of paper. He looked nervous. "We need to talk." I sat down. "Okay." I've been thinking. Those 4 words never lead anywhere good. I should have access to all your accounts. I blinked. What? Your business accounts? Savings. Everything. I stared at him. Why? Because I'm your husband. I waited for more. That was apparently his entire argument. Ryan, these are business accounts. You always have an excuse. I recognized that line immediately. Vanessa. Again. He pushed the papers toward me. I wrote down some things. I looked down. There was an actual list. Add Ryan to business account. Add Ryan to truck title. Joint ownership of property. Shared access to financial records. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't a conversation. This was a demand. You've been planning this. He looked offended. It's called protecting my future. I slowly set the papers down. I've never hidden anything from you. But you've kept me out. No. I've kept my business organized. You don't trust me. I stared at him. No, I don't think I do. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went silent. Ryan looked wounded. Then angry. You know what, Vanessa was right. There it was again. Always Vanessa. Always her voice. He stood. I've invested 5 years of my life in this marriage. I frowned. Invested. That word sounded strange. Cold. Transactionnel. You make it sound like you're expecting a return. He crossed his arms. Maybe I am. A chill ran through me. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. Calculation. I realized this wasn't about love anymore. This was about assets. Money. Ownership. And then he said the words that changed everything. If you don't start treating me like an equal partner, maybe we should get divorced. Silence filled the room. I looked at him. He looked back, waiting, almost hopeful, as if he expected me to panic, to beg, to compromise, to give him what he wanted. Instead, I simply asked, "Is that what you want?" His confidence faltered. I didn't say that. You just threatened divorce. I said maybe. I nodded slowly. Then I stood. For some reason, my hands were shaking. Not because I was scared, because something inside me had finally broken. I looked at the man I'd loved for 5 years and barely recognized him. "Who are you?" I whispered. He looked confused. What? The man I married would never talk to me like this. His face softened briefly, but then he said it again. Vanessa says. I held up my hand. No. He stopped. I'm tired of hearing what Vanessa says. The room became painfully quiet. I suddenly realized something. I wasn't losing my husband. I had already lost him. And I had a terrible feeling. He and his sister were planning something much bigger than I understood. I filed first. 3 weeks later, I found out exactly how right that feeling was. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage, replacing brake pads on my truck. The garage door was partially open because of the fumes from the brake cleaner. Inside the house, I could hear voices. Ryan and Vanessa. At first, I ignored them. Then I heard my name. I froze. Vanessa was speaking. You have to stop being emotional and start being strategic. I frowned. Ryan laughed softly. I'm trying. No. You're not. You're being too nice. I slowly set my wrench down. You need access to everything before she realizes what's happening. Silence. Then Ryan spoke. She's starting to get suspicious. Vanessa clicked her tongue. Then cry. Tell her you feel excluded. Make her feel guilty. My stomach dropped. I moved closer to the open window. Men like... Vanessa stopped herself and laughed. Sorry. Women like Natalie think they're smarter than everyone else. But they're not. They just need the right pressure. Ryan laughed too. Actually laughed. I felt sick. Then, I heard something even worse. I'm already keeping notes. He said, Vanessa sounded pleased. Good. Document everything. Everything. Every time she questions your spending. Every time she's gone for work. Every argument. Build a case. I stopped breathing. Build a case. For what? Ryan asked. In case of divorce? Obviously. The words hit me like a punch. They were planning it. The divorce threat hadn't been emotional. It had been a strategy. Vanessa continued. You need to show financial control and emotional neglect. Ryan was quiet. Then he said something I'll never forget. I deserve half after 5 years anyway. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth. Not loneliness. Not love. Not saving our marriage. Money. This entire thing had become a financial operation. I listened for another 40 minutes. Every second made me feel like a fool. They discussed my busy season. They discussed my savings. They discussed my truck. They even talked about taking pictures of my property to document marital assets. At one point, Vanessa laughed. When you get your settlement, you'll finally have security. Settlement. They were talking about my life like it was a lottery ticket. I stood in that garage and felt something inside me die. The woman who would have fought for her marriage disappeared. In her place stood a business owner, a survivor, a woman who suddenly understood she was under attack. I walked into the house an hour later, pretending nothing had happened. Ryan smiled at me. Hey, Baba. I smiled back. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. That night, I barely slept. At 6 a.m, I called my father. Dad. He immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? I told him everything. Every word. Every plan. When I finished, there was silence. Then he sighed. I was afraid of this. I sat on the edge of the bed. What do I do? His answer came instantly. You protect yourself. I cried after hanging up. Not because I was losing my marriage, but because I realized my father had been right all along. The next day, we met with an attorney. I expected embarrassment. Instead, the attorney listened carefully and nodded. You've built these assets before, and independently of the marriage, he said. You have options. For the next 3 weeks, my life became a secret operation. I transferred my business into a family trust. The truck, the equipment, the savings, the house, everything was done legally and carefully. Nothing was hidden. Everything was documented. Every piece of paperwork felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Meanwhile, Ryan had no idea. He still played the role of loving husband. He kissed my cheek goodbye, cooked dinner, asked about my routes. Sometimes I caught him looking around the house, calculating, evaluating. I wondered if he was imagining what he'd buy with his half. The thought made me sick. I also started documenting everything, every demand, every threat, every conversation. I saved text messages, took notes, kept records. One evening, Ryan sat beside me on the couch. You've seemed distracted lately. I looked at him. Maybe once I would have told him everything. Now he felt like a stranger, just tired. He touched my hand. We'll be okay. The irony nearly made me laugh. No, we wouldn't, because the marriage he thought he could manipulate was already over. By the end of the 3rd week, my attorney called. We're ready. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I whispered, do it. On a Tuesday morning, Ryan was served divorce papers at work. I was home when he walked through the front door. I heard it slam. Then his footsteps, fast, heavy. He stormed into the living room holding the papers. What the hell is this? I looked up calmly. It's a divorce petition. His face turned red. You filed? Yes. You can't do this. The words sounded strangely familiar. I remembered him threatening me. I remembered him saying, maybe we should get divorced. Apparently, It had only been a good idea when he believed he controlled it. "You were supposed to fight for us," he shouted. I stood slowly. "No. Ryan, I was supposed to surrender." He blinked. "What? You wanted me scared." "I didn't. You wanted me to hand over my business. My accounts. My assets." "That's not true." I looked directly into his eyes. "Then why were you planning our divorce with Vanessa?" The color drained from his face. Silence. Pure. Terrified silence. I finally knew. He knew exactly what he'd done. "How?" he whispered. "I heard everything." He looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. "Natalie, no." He opened his mouth again. I raised my hand. "No more lies." He looked at the papers, then back at me. Then, something changed. The sadness vanished. Anger replaced it. "You can't leave me with nothing." There it was. Not, "I love you." Not, "Let's fix this." Not, "I'm sorry." Nothing. Just, "You can't leave me with nothing." I almost pitied him. Almost. I invested 5 years into this marriage. I stared at him. "You mean you expected a return?" His breathing became ragged. "I have rights. You have exactly what belongs to you. You owe me half." "No." "Ryan." I looked at him with tears in my eyes. "I don't owe you my life." At that exact moment, his phone rang. The screen lit up. "Vanessa." He answered immediately. Within an hour. She was standing in my living room, and she looked furious. The plan backfired. Vanessa stormed into my house, like she owned it. She didn't even say hello. She slapped the divorce papers onto the kitchen counter. "What kind of stunt is this?" I folded my arms. "It's called a divorce. You can't just blindside my brother." I almost laughed. That's interesting. Coming from someone who spent months planning one for the first time. Vanessa looked uneasy. Ryan's eyes widened. "Natalie." "No," I said firmly. "We're done pretending." I looked directly at Vanessa. I heard everything. Every conversation. Every plan. Every little strategy. Silence. She recovered quickly. "You must have misunderstood." I didn't. Ryan looked from me to his sister, then back to me. I could see the panic setting in. Vanessa stepped closer. "Fine. So, it doesn't matter. Ryan is still entitled to half." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "My attorney disagrees." Her confidence faltered. "You can't hide assets." I didn't. You transferred everything. Legally. Ryan's face was turning pale. "What does she mean?" I looked at him. "The house is protected." He blinked. "The truck is protected." Another blink. "The business is protected." His mouth slowly fell open. "The savings are protected." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ryan whispered, "What?" Vanessa turned toward him. "Don't panic." That was the wrong thing to say. "Don't panic," he shouted. I had never heard him raise his voice at his sister before. "You said I would get half." She looked offended. "That's what normally happens." "Normally," he yelled. "You promised me." Promised. There it was. The entire truth. Vanessa hadn't merely poisoned my husband. She had sold him a fantasy where he walked away rich, a fantasy where my years of sacrifice became his reward. Ryan looked at me. "You planned this." I nodded. "Yes." Tears filled his eyes. "You knew." "Yes. And you just waited." I swallowed hard. "I gave you every opportunity to be honest." He looked shattered. "You never loved me." The accusation hurt, because it wasn't true. "I loved you enough to trust you," I said quietly. "Then why are you doing this?" I felt my own tears forming. "Because you stopped loving me first." Silence. I continued. You didn't fight for our marriage. Ryan. You planned for our divorce? He looked away, and that was all the answer I needed. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled. Ryan hired an attorney, then another. Neither of them gave him the answer he wanted. The first lawyer reviewed everything and simply said, "You don't have a case." The second attorney said almost the same thing. The assets had been acquired before the marriage. Everything had been transferred legally and properly documented. There was nothing to challenge. Ryan cried in the parking lot after that meeting. I know because he called me. Natalie, please. I sat in my truck, listening to him breathe. I don't know what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort him, but the other part remembered him laughing while planning my financial destruction. You'll figure it out. You can't leave me with nothing. I closed my eyes. Again, nothing. No apology. No remorse. Just money. I ended the call. The divorce itself lasted only 4 months. There wasn't much to fight over. Ryan kept his own savings. I kept everything I had built. When the judge finalized the divorce, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. 5 years. Gone. I sat in my truck afterward and cried. Not because I wanted him back, but because I mourned the man I thought I had married. The man who probably never existed. For a while, I heard very little about Ryan. Then 6 months later, an old mutual friend called. Natalie, have you heard? Heard what? Vanessa. Apparently, there had been a huge fight. Ryan had discovered something shocking. During the entire time Vanessa had been coaching him to divorce me, she had secretly been seeing her second ex-husband again. Going to dinner, taking weekend trips, trying to reconcile. I nearly dropped my phone. What? She was telling your ex to destroy his marriage, while secretly rebuilding her own. The hypocrisy was unbelievable. But it got worse. Ryan found out by accident. He walked into a restaurant and saw Vanessa holding hands with her ex-husband. According to my friend, the argument that followed was explosive. Ryan screamed. Vanessa screamed. People recorded it on their phones. At one point, Ryan actually threw a breadstick across the restaurant. I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. He accused his sister of ruining his life. She accused him of being weak and irresponsible. The entire relationship between them collapsed. A few months later, I learned Ryan had moved back in with his parents. He had taken a full-time retail job. The lifestyle he'd once taken for granted was gone. As for Vanessa, she eventually disappeared from town altogether. No one seemed to know where she went. And honestly, I didn't care, because by then, my own life had finally begun again. About 8 months after the divorce, I met someone, Daniel Brooks. He owned a small logistics company. He understood transportation, understood long hours, understood sacrifice. On our third date, I told him everything, the entire story. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he smiled. Natalie? Yeah, you didn't lose your marriage. I frowned. He reached across the table and took my hand. You escaped a scam. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. For the first time in years, someone understood. Daniel never asked how much money I made, never asked about my accounts, never cared about my truck title. He cared about me, the woman behind the steering wheel. And that's when I finally understood something. Love doesn't keep score. Love doesn't demand ownership. Love doesn't sit around planning your downfall. The woman who built that trucking business survived because she learned a hard lesson. You can recover from heartbreak. You can recover from betrayal. But never ignore someone who starts treating your love like an investment, because the moment someone sees your marriage as a payday, the relationship is already over. And if I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: protect your peace, protect your work, And never apologize for walking away from people who mistake your kindness for weakness.